Pues sí, en mi casa yo estoy sembrando café. Ya está un poquitico más altico. Ahorita estoy en el colegio, quiero seguir estudiando, ayudarle a mis abuelos. Quiero ser médica, sí quiero estudiar medicina.
Diana Bustos lives on a coffee farm in Colombia. The farm does not make much money. Diana's chances of becoming a doctor are very slim.
When it's green, it's a berry.
Berry, yeah.
When it's red, it's a cherry. If you open it up, you've got two things that look a bit like coffee beans. So that is what your coffee looked like when it just came off the tree.
From the beginning, we have been processing the plants around us for food and drink. And amongst them all, coffee has been unique. Humans love coffee. We drink 1.5 billion cups of coffee every day.
Café pergamino seco, café verde o almendra, café tostado y molido.
Coffee is the second most widely traded commodity in the world, after oil. And that's the trouble. The coffee industry is huge. Coffee drinkers have become mere consumers who don't know where their coffee was grown or who grew it. Nor do they care.
Today we're divorced from where we buy the majority of our product. We don't see the conditions that were made, we don't see the people who made them, so we don't empathise with those people anymore. And we just say, oh, they'll make it cheaper, therefore it's good for me.
In the global coffee trade, good for me has worked out well for the coffee drinkers, not so well for those who grow it. For them, it has often led to poverty, disease, and conflict. New Zealand has also adopted coffee as a beverage of choice. We now cheerfully pay up to $4 for a top-of-the-line latte. We drink almost twice as much coffee as we did 5 years ago. We've got more coffee roasting companies per head than anyone else in the world.
Over 100 roasters in New Zealand, 4 million people. It's pretty crazy, really.
New Zealand has probably become a world leader in its coffee. In quality, in the way it's presented, in the cup.
Coffee is an industry that is as complex as the wine industry.
Cupping is a way of determining the quality of the actual beverage.
This cup's quite fruity, isn't it?
And then you just cup it as if you're cupping wine. And by doing this, if you are experienced enough and if you are trained to recognize certain flavors, you can determine the profile in the cup.
We have become world-class consumers, but we too know little or nothing about where our coffee has come from.
New Zealand imports about 100,000 bags of coffee. About 10,000 bags, or 10%, is Colombian coffee.
I am in love with Colombian coffee. What I do is I use as a base Colombian and then blend it with others to create a different blend. At least I know the farmers, I know where I'm getting them from. That's a guarantee I have, at least.
What do the rest of us know of Colombia? How does the world coffee market work for growers there?
Se vivió una crisis muy profunda la década pasada, fruto del rompimiento del Pacto Mundial del Café. Eso se dio en el año 89. En esa época pues había un pacto de cuotas. Al romperse, pues la industria cafetera entró en lo que conocemos como libre mercado. Pues allí eso está gobernado por oferta y demanda.
The big coffee roasters, who between them control about 50% of the world's coffee market, they've been able to force down the prices that they're paying to the mainly smallholder coffee farmers.
Nearly all of Colombia's coffee farms are small, less than 3 acres. But with over 500,000 of them, it is still the third biggest coffee producer in the world, exporting more than 10 million bags every year.
Due to the fact that we have small pieces of land in a very steep slopes of Colombia, hand-picking the coffee. We cannot compete cost-wise with somebody that is mechanized thousands and thousands of hectares in one farm and so on. So there's only one possibility for survival of Colombian coffee, and that is quality.
But things were about to get even harder for Colombia.
Entraron otros actores que no eran muy importantes a producir café, hubo un sobreabastecimiento de café. Eso llevó a que los precios internacionales se deprimieran, cayeran como nunca antes se habían visto.
Vietnam was one of those countries that caused Colombia's economic turmoil. Encouraged by the World Bank and the IMF, Vietnam planted coffee. Once a minor grower, it is now the second largest after Brazil. That has contributed hugely to an oversupply of coffee.
Debido a que los costos de producción no eran compensados con los precios que se obtenían, muchos productores dejaron de pagar sus deudas, se deterioró un poco la calidad, hubo desplazamiento de caficultores hacia las zonas, las fincas fueron abandonadas, los que no podían irse, ellos lograron subsistir, pero con todas las penurias que eso implica, escasamente lograban sobrevivir.
The natural response to that should be that farmers decrease the amount of coffee that's being produced. It's not that straightforward. It usually takes about 5 years for a coffee tree to mature. And so for them to abandon their crops, it is incredibly risky.
Si en una familia se trata de que llegue un poco de mejor nivel de vida, hay más paz. Si en esa familia hay un poco de paz, hay en la vereda. Entonces, para que haya paz, se necesita también que haya justicia. Justo el productor, justo el exportador, justo el importador. Y justo es quien nos compre el café.
There is new thinking in the world about how countries like Colombia can deal with these volatile movements in the market. One answer, growing in popularity, is the concept of fair trade.
Fair trade is an alternative model of international trade which just aims to address some of the inequalities in the conventional trading system by sharing the benefits of trade more equitably between the consumers, between the environment, and most importantly with the producer. That price has been calculated to ensure that farmers can cover their costs of production primarily and meet their basic needs. If the international market price falls below the fair trade price, the farmers will always be paid this fair trade price, and so they're protected from the fluctuations in the market. On top of that, they're paid a premium, and that premium is for investment in local community development.
Ese sobreprecio va a motivar a esas comunidades rurales cafeteras a seguir trabajando porque están viendo una oportunidad para seguir creciendo, seguir mejorando y seguir viviendo de ese proyecto que es café.
As well as new ideas like fair trade, exporters from Colombia are sending representatives here to get to know their markets.
Most people in New Zealand have hardly heard of Colombia, so I think it's very important if we can come here and we can give them, we can tell them how the industry works, why our coffee is different, why quality matters. We don't really know Atomic Coffee. We're just going to meet with them, and our goal will be to start some sort of a business relationship with them.
Our goal as a company is to work towards trying to make sure that the coffee that we buy is sustainably sourced and ethically traded.
And New Zealand is also starting to make the effort to find out more about where its coffee comes from.
Very typical for a fair trade importer to want to meet the growers and vice versa, and to establish trust, and it hasn't been safe or easy for coffee importers to visit Colombia very recently.
Hello. Good morning. We'll be going to visit a couple of places that supply us, and just to meet those people and to say I use your coffee and I think it's really good. I'd like to establish some kind of direct relationship with them.
These Kiwis are all in the coffee roasting business, here to meet Colombian growers. All are keen proponents of fair trade.
If you look at what goes into your $3.50 latte, The amount that goes to the coffee grower is only a few cents. The amount that's gone to the growers has increased through fair trade from about 3 cents to about 7 or 8 cents.
Gracias al Comercio Justo, pues hemos tenido posibilidades de capacitarnos, de ser más integrales a nivel familiar.
Realmente la mayoría de las familias están haciendo es inversión hacia el beneficio del café. Y el otro que se está invirtiendo en la educación de la familia, porque muchos son padres de familia.
What fair trade tries to say is these people are your neighbours, they are the people that live down the road, they're just a wee bit further away and they deserve what we would expect to get ourselves.
Los problemas sociales, los conflictos sociales hacen que de pronto los jóvenes nos vayamos del campo a la ciudad, ¿no? Entonces digamos que dentro del comercio justo para nosotros ha sido bueno, pero ahora le estamos cogiendo como más amor al campo, más amor al trabajo en sí, como nosotros acá somos productores de café.
It's a massive change in their lives. They're able to feed their kids, they're able to send them to school, they're able to afford basic healthcare and clothes in many situations.
Sobre precios de flow que uno va mejorando, le va mejorando la producción. Logré comprar ese lote allá al otro lado.
People say, well, fair trade's products have a higher price to them. And I say, no, everything's got the same price. It just depends who we want to pay it. So if you pay less for something, someone's paying for it somewhere down the line. They're paying the difference, and normally they're paying in their lifestyle.
Pues me ha parecido muy bueno porque pues ha tenido ayudas, ¿no? Porque más antes no contaba con todo esto.
Aquí sí compramos la estufa y la nevera.
¿Y cómo es la vida con una estufa y nevera?
Pues muy bueno ya, porque pues todo, en la nevera todo está fresquito y ahí pues se cocina rápido.
Esperanza mía es pues seguir trabajando con el café para darle un futuro más adelante, el estudio más que todo.
The first coffee cooperative that New Zealanders visit is Sencoic in southwestern Colombia. Sencoic represents 8 different tribal groups and tries to protect them from political violence and to encourage economic development.
Para nosotros es un motivo de alegría poderlos tener aquí y espero que en esta visita puedan conocernos un poco más que lo que en realidad buscamos nosotros como comunidades indígenas.
The worst problem facing Sencoic is a depressingly common one for Colombia. The country has been ripped apart by internal war for over 40 years.
Es una situación bastante delicada donde han tenido participación grupos subversivos, grupos paramilitares, grupos de narcotraficantes, que sumado todo pues ha hecho que esa situación haya sido demasiado caótica, ha generado desplazamiento, ha generado pérdida de valores, ha generado pobreza en algunas regiones.
The long-running civil war has left tens of thousands dead and has been described by the United Nations as one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The brutal conflict pits the state against left-wing rebels and some right-wing paramilitaries. Insurgents launched campaigns to overthrow the government in the 1960s, but since then the armed groups have been drawn into kidnapping and the illegal drugs trade. Some of them seem to be now more interested in fat cocaine profits than politics.
As the conflict moves from region to region and as the different actors go looking for places where they can grow illicit crops to finance their wars, this has affected some of the coffee areas, and you will find coffee producers from many regions of Colombia that have been forced to leave their land and go to the cities to find however they can a means of living.
The Colombian government, supported with billions of dollars from the United States, has spent the best part of a decade indiscriminately spraying large areas of farmland with herbicide in an attempt to combat the production of coca, the raw material of cocaine. These aerial sprayings have come under attack from human rights and environmental groups around the world.
La catástrofe que causan las fumigaciones con glifosato, porque al esparcirse en avión las partículas no solamente caen dentro del cultivo de hoja de coca, sino que van a dar a los diferentes productos, a los diferentes cultivos. De hecho, también hay muchas enfermedades que afectan a las comunidades indígenas y campesinas, también a los afrodescendientes.
Colombia supplies 80% of the global cocaine market. Its coca fields are not only a human catastrophe, it's an environmental one. So far, coca growers using slash and burn cultivation have destroyed an area larger than Wales in their efforts to produce more of the drug.
So if we stop consumption of illicit drugs, then production won't go, then the jungle and the rainforest won't be open to grow this, and nobody will have to go and spray anything.
Nosotros estamos entre la espada y la pared, porque está la fuerza del Estado y las fuerzas insurgentes. Y entonces nosotros, por convicción y pensamiento NASA, hemos dicho de que no compartimos la violencia. Entonces para los jóvenes, debido a que no hay trabajo estable, que muchos jóvenes pues por la misma necesidad se involucran, ¿no?
Cuando los jóvenes tienen cómo sobrevivir acá en el campo o en la ciudad, entonces no se sienten tentados para irse a la guerrilla o irse a los cultivos ilícitos.
Ese es un caso en que se vive y de allí que la organización pues tiene como meta cómo dignificar la economía y la producción.
More than 3 million civilians have been displaced as armed groups bombard their villages or subject them to massacres, giving Colombia the third largest internally displaced population in the world. The ups and downs of commodity markets can literally mean the difference between war and peace. Over recent years, when coffee prices fell, violence in coffee areas rose dramatically. Partnerships formed with organisations like Trade Aid are vital for Sincaroc to survive these cycles of war and peace, boom and bust. These growers want only to market their coffee successfully and improve their standard of living. Today, the group from New Zealand visit one of the Sincaroc coffee farms.
Ha permitido que conozcamos todo el proceso de la comercialización del café, poder tener lo que estamos teniendo hoy, una visita de un cliente, poder hablar con él.
Atomic Coffee Roasters is a company that's owned by Cerebus Griggs, New Zealand's biggest importer of green coffee, biggest roaster. Before they bought us, they didn't really have much of a concept of fair trade, other than that it was probably something that they should be thinking about. They've been allowing us to move more and more in that direction.
Esta es mi casa.
¿Y quién vive aquí?
Está mi esposa, mis 3 hijos. Los que van para el colegio se levantan a las 5 de la mañana, desayunan a las 6 y se van para estar a las 7:30 en el colegio.
To think that every cup of espresso has about a couple hundred of these, it's quite crazy. So these people probably, I don't know, it'd probably take them a minute to pick a cup's worth or something like that. But still, the value of that is far less for them than it is for us. I feel bad every time I drop a single cherry.
These people who grow the coffee and work so hard are getting paid so little for it.
Esta zona tiene un problema bastante fuerte en secado. No tiene entonces.
No tiene.
Secan es en el piso. Cuando llueve mucho no hay cómo secar. Ese es el gran problema. Si no se le da un buen secado, entonces la calidad del café se deteriora muy rápido. Sabe a moho, ya no es bueno.
Una asociación que es conformada por 125 familias. Más del 80 al 85% de los socios no tienen ni siquiera una pasera como esta. Son materiales, a excepción del plástico, el resto se consigue en la zona.
¿Cuánto cuesta este?
El presupuesto fue con la mano de obra, $200,000 pesos.
It was wonderful to go to Sincaroc. To actually see it in the flesh is impressive, really humbling. I think it helps them enormously to be able to sell their coffee as their own, because that in itself is a source of pride. More producers need to be dealing with the world more directly, and I think that's what fair trade achieves. It's a really good way to show Cerebus that we can improve the quality and the transparency of the coffee that we buy dramatically.
Well, Ewan's work and interest in fair trade coffee has enabled us to grow the usage here at Atomic to just under 90%, depending on availability.
In Australia and New Zealand, the sale of fair trade coffee has doubled in the last few years, making them the fastest growing fair trade markets in the world. We bought more than $10 million worth of fair trade certified coffee in 2008.
Back home, sales in fair trade coffee are set to jump by 2/3 from $8 million annually to over $13 million. From tomorrow, Wild Bean Café will serve only fair trade espresso in its 78 service stations nationwide. Wild Bean says the move's in response to increasing demand for ethically and sustainably sourced products.
Consumers have extreme power. Big corporations are watching to see where the consumer goes with their dollar, and they will follow it.
Usage of fair trade coffee has grown from about 8 tonnes 4 or 5 years ago to in excess of 300 tonnes in the coming year. That would be in excess of 25 million cups of fair trade coffee per year.
People have come to understand much more about the conditions under which goods are traded. It's not only about coffee or any one commodity, it's not even just about fair trade, but it's actually about people being what we call conscious consumers and understanding the conditions under which the things they buy are made.
Change is incremental, isn't it? I mean, every little bit counts, and I mean, that's the only way that anything's going to change, is if people start doing a little bit and then doing a little bit more.
Si tuviera la oportunidad de pronto de salir a donde se hace el mercado del café, pues les diría, queremos que nos apoyen porque somos jóvenes que estamos saliendo adelante. No queremos estar en conflictos sociales, ya sea conflictos armados, de pronto recurrir a cultivos ilícitos. Estamos protegiendo el medio ambiente, estamos motivando a la gente para que nos ayude a minimizar un poco los conflictos sociales.
Pues la familia, en ese caso los hijos, que ya están involucrados en todo esto y que me están acompañando, ¿no? Eso es lo más importante. Muchas gracias.
Because you see it on the shelf, the packaging's, you know, they put a lot of money into the design of package. You go, ooh, it immediately satisfies that. And you're like, quick, I'll just put it in the cup and it's going to take me to Colombia. But of course, it's cheap. That's replacing the coffee experience with packaging. It gives you the experience without any commitment. Experience without commitment.
Fondo Pays is another coffee cooperative. It is made up of 550 producers from one of the largest indigenous groups in Colombia, the Pays. It was established to preserve traditional agricultural knowledge and culture, which had been put at risk by endless fighting and oppression.
Se están juntando aquí los productores con los clientes, y dentro de los clientes una variedad de clientes, porque aquí hay un cliente que compra, pero hay otros que le compran a ese cliente y tuestan su café y lo elaboran para entregárselo al cliente final.
Buenas tardes para todos. Agradezco por parte mía, que estoy muy contento que han venido a visitar aquí.
Mi nombre es Justin Percy, estoy importador de café, Comercio Justo en Nueva Zelanda.
El Comercio Justo dice, nunca por debajo del precio justo.
How fair is fair trade? One of the ways we can judge is through a certification system. This involves the independent auditing of producers and traders to make sure agreed standards are met.
It's not the only way, there are other ways, and to regiment this philosophy into a program, does that mean that you can't do it independently? Does this mean you can't feel and operate in business without it being certified? I hope not.
When you go and ask roasters, you know, do you pay a fair price? Everyone says, yes, we pay a fair price. And I think the consumers are quite right to say, we'd like a little bit more than your kind of personal assurance on this. You know, we would like a system of certification.
Perhaps you might be interested in what one of my days looks like in Wellington. I would start work at about 5:30 in the morning. At the moment, we roast about 430 kilos of coffee a week. I take the green coffee and I put it into our coffee tostador, in the coffee roasting machine, and I test the coffee as it roasts. I can look at it through a hole in the machine, and it changes smell from being grassy to a toasted chocolate smell. I'm looking for the perfect colour and smell and shape. At the opportune time, I open the door to the roaster and the hot smoking coffee comes out. And when it is cold, we weigh it, or we put it in bags and take it to our cafe. This part of my day is my favourite, when I take the bags of coffee into the shop and I put them on the shelf.
Y los pongo en la estantería.
And the customers come in and take it all off the shelf. And in the shop, the barista is making espresso coffee, and the customers are very happy. So that is my job, is to try and roast coffee the best and to excite people about the story of fair trade and the producers. So like Ewan, I will be taking some of the story from here back to the customers in New Zealand.
Para nosotros es dificultoso conocer cómo es el proceso, cómo son las máquinas, cómo es el trabajo, y uno al escuchar uno como que se emociona mucho porque sabe que ese producto que uno tiene acá, como esa mata, todo el trabajo que hay que hacer y que pues es muy reconocido.
Creo que para nosotros esa mata es muy sagrada, pero no sabíamos que pues, en otra parte también había ese interés de valorarla y todo, ¿no? Teníamos el café, lo vendíamos al comercio, pero en ningún momento nos habían dicho, bueno, este es el valor de su café, esto es importante. Y eso lo emociona mucho a uno. Ahorita actualmente pues me da como esa alegría tanto de saber de que pues sí, de nuestros productos le han dado mucha importancia a usted.
Muchas gracias por creer en nosotros y seguir.
The coffee trade is huge, and Colombia is a long jet miles from New Zealand. But this group have wound the clock back. By holding on to these new ideas of trade, even by just coming here, they have made the growers of this region their neighbours. They know them now. They expect them to be treated well.
Quiero ser médica, si quiero estudiar medicina.
Good things come from a good environment. If coffee is grown in a clean, organic and sustainable manner by people who are actually interested in what they're doing, then it's going to be better, and I think that's the bottom line.